My pregnant wife kissed me goodbye on a Friday afternoon and told me to take our kids camping so she could finally get some rest. She said she loved me. She said she was proud of how hard I'd been working. 2 days later, I came home to a woman who wouldn't meet my eyes, a bruise on her hip she couldn't explain, and a phone that had somehow grown a passcode overnight. I told myself I was imagining things. Pregnant women get tired, forgetful, distant. I was wrong about almost everything that summer, but I was most wrong about that. My name is Daniel Hart. I'm 43, I install commercial HVAC systems for a living, and until that summer, I would have told you, without hesitation, that I had the best marriage of anyone I knew. 11 years, 2 kids, a third on the way. I want you to understand what this was built on top of, because that's the only way the rest of this is going to make sense. Welcome to Toxic Family Revenge Tales. If you enjoy true stories of betrayal and family secrets, subscribe, because Daniel's story is only getting started. I met my wife, Renee, at a mutual friend's barbecue in Millbrook, the small town outside Columbus where we both still live. She was 28, sharp-tongued, and completely unimpressed by the company logo half peeled off my truck door. She told me later what actually got her wasn't the truck, it was watching me teach her shy 8-year-old nephew how to skip rocks. She said she knew right then I'd make a good father. She was right. 2 weeks later we had our first date. 14 months after that, I proposed on the bridge over the creek where she used to walk her dog. We built our life the slow, ordinary way. A house with too much yard. Our son, Caleb, born 6 years in. Our daughter, Maddie, 2 years after him. By the summer this story starts, Caleb was 9, Maddie was 6, and Renee was 7 months pregnant with our third, a girl we'd already named Lily. Our mornings had a rhythm. I was out the door by 6:15 most days to beat the Ohio heat on attic jobs. Renee handled school mornings and did the books, part-time, for her father's trucking company, Howler & Freight, built from one truck in the 80s into a regional outfit with almost 40 drivers. Evenings were for the kids, Caleb deep in a dinosaur phase that summer, Maddie showing her missing front tooth to every mail carrier who'd stand still for it. Most nights, after they went down, Renee and I sat on the back porch with the bug zapper humming, talking about nothing. Bills, her dad's retirement plans, whether Caleb needed glasses. I'm telling you all of this because I need you to understand what it felt like to lose it, 1 inch at a time, without ever seeing the tide come in. We'd planned a 4th of July camping trip, me and the 2 older kids, a state park 2 hours north. Renee, 7 months along, was the one who suggested it. Take them, she said one night in May, rubbing her belly the way she did when Lily kicked. I love camping, you know I do, but I can't do a tent right now. I'll get some rest. Maybe see my sister. It'll be good for me. I kissed her forehead. I told her I loved her for thinking of it. I had no idea what I was actually looking at. The first cracks weren't dramatic. That's the cruel part of stories like this one. They never are. They're small enough that you start to feel unreasonable for noticing them at all. Early June. Her phone, always face up on the counter, ringer on, no passcode in 11 years, suddenly locked. She laughed it off. A scam call. Wanting to be careful. Then her schedule shifted. Later nights, catching up on invoicing before maternity leave. Then the bruise on her hip, blooming purple above the curve of her belly, explained away as a run-in with a filing cabinet while moving boxes she shouldn't have been moving at 7 months pregnant. I scolded her, gently, for not taking care of herself. She smiled and told me I worried too much. I believed every single one of those explanations completely. I want that on the record, because it matters. I wasn't a suspicious husband building a case. I was a man who trusted his wife so completely that the truth, even when it started leaking through, didn't register as truth. It registered as noise I filtered out because it didn't fit the picture I already had of my own life. The trip itself was good. I need to say that plainly, because it stays true no matter what comes after it. Caleb caught his first base off the dock at dusk, and the look on his face when that line went taut is something I'll carry for the rest of my life, completely separate from everything else. Maddie found a box turtle in the underbrush, named it Waffles, and spent 20 minutes negotiating, unsuccessfully, to bring it home. I called Renee both nights. The first call, she sounded normal, tired but normal, said she'd had dinner with her sister Kayla and gone to bed early. The second call, there was a half-second lag before she answered anything, like she was translating the question from somewhere else in the room. I noticed it. I told myself it was pregnancy exhaustion, and I let it go. We got home Sunday night, sunburned and smelling like campfire smoke, and Renee's hug at the door was a half-second too short, her eyes not quite finding mine. That night, I found her phone locked again, face down on the nightstand instead of face up on the counter, and when I asked if everything was okay, she snapped at me, sharper than I'd heard her in years, then immediately apologized and blamed hormones. I let it go again. I want you to understand how many times I let things go that summer. Not because I was blind, because the alternative, the thing my gut was quietly trying to hand me, was too enormous to hold directly. It's easier to believe your wife is tired than to believe she's lying to your face. Through July, the pattern deepened. Unscheduled office days, later nights, less reaching for my hand in the car, less falling asleep against my chest, always explained away by a body that didn't feel like her own anymore. I told myself that made sense too. Then came the night in early August I still think about more than almost any other. Caleb had a nightmare, something about Waffles the turtle trapped in a storm drain, and came looking for us at 1 a.m. Renee wasn't in bed. I found her at the kitchen table in the dark, phone in her hand, and when I hit the light switch she nearly came out of her skin. "Baby names," she said. The screen went black before I saw anything. She pulled the phone against her chest instead of just setting it down. It wasn't the lie that finally sat me upright. It was that gesture. I'm not proud of what came next, though I understand now why I did it. I started mapping the pattern on a legal pad I kept hidden in my truck. The late nights only ever landing on days her father was out of town. The mileage on her car not matching the drive to the warehouse and back by 20, 30 miles some days. I asked Kayla, carefully, what time she and Renee had eaten dinner that camping weekend, framing it as planning a surprise. Kayla hesitated for half a second too long before covering with a laugh, and a few days later, pressed more directly. She broke. Renee had asked her, after the fact, to say they'd had dinner, if it ever came up. Kayla hadn't thought to ask why. She looked sick realizing what she might have covered for. Then a coffee receipt from across town, time-stamped for an afternoon Renee said she'd spent doing invoices. Then, on our shared laptop, a search history with directions to an apartment complex that had nothing to do with Halloran Freight. On a Thursday I told her was a work emergency. I drove past that building instead. Renee's car was parked in a visitor spot. An hour before the OB appointment, she said she was headed to. I sat across the street for 11 minutes, hands shaking on the wheel, then drove home, picked up my kids from my mother's, and read Caleb a chapter about megalodons. Because whatever was collapsing in my marriage, they still needed a father who showed up looking like nothing was wrong. I bought a voice recorder with cash, 2 towns over, so there'd be no record of it on our shared bank statement. I left it under a stack of napkins in her car console the following Monday. Here's the part of this story I almost didn't tell the way it actually happened, because for a long time I told myself the simpler version. Wife strays. Husband finds out. Wife begs forgiveness. That version is true. It's just not the whole tape. The recording confirmed the affair, with a man named Marcus Delane, a dispatcher her father had hired that spring, on Renee's own recommendation, 12 years younger than either of us. A man I'd shaken hands with exactly once, at a company picnic, while he asked me thoughtful questions about compressor efficiency, and my wife stood 3 feet away, smiling. That part matched what I expected to find. What I didn't expect was the argument on that same recording, a week before I confronted her. Renee's voice, not soft, not guilty sounding, telling Marcus it was over, that she'd made a mistake, that she couldn't do this to her family. And him pushing back, and her ending it, and being pulled back in, not by romance, by something closer to being told things about herself she was starving to hear, tangled up with a depression that had quietly started well before Lily was even born. Nobody had a name for it yet, because everyone assumes that particular darkness waits until after the baby comes. That doesn't make it not a betrayal. I don't think complexity is the same thing as innocence, and I want to be clear, I never let myself believe it was. But it changed what I was actually angry at. For 2 months, I'd built a villain in my head, calculating, cold, enjoying the lie. What I actually found on that recorder was a woman trying to stop, failing, hating herself for failing, and hiding the failing because she was more afraid of my face than of her own conscience. I confronted her on a Wednesday night, for days before her due date, same kitchen table her grandmother had left her. I didn't yell. I laid it out in order. The mileage, the receipt, Kayla, the building, the recorder, because some part of me needed her to understand this hadn't been a guess. She didn't fight it. She told me it started the week of the camping trip, that it wasn't about anything I'd done, that she'd tried to end it twice already before I ever found out, and hadn't told me because she was terrified I'd read the failed attempts as calculation instead of what they actually were, closer to drowning. I asked if Lily was mine. She looked like I'd struck her, said the timeline made anything else impossible, and a DNA test after the birth confirmed she was right. I'm telling you that because I know it's the question sitting underneath every other question, and because it's the one piece of that night that turned out to be exactly as true as she said. Lily was born 4 days later. I was in the room. I cut the cord. I held her first, before Renee did. And looking down at this furious, brand new person, I felt a love so complete it nearly took my knees out, braided together with a grief I still don't have a full name for. I moved into the guest room that week. I saw a lawyer, not to file anything yet, just to understand what protecting my kids would actually require. My brother wanted to drive up and find Marcus himself. I talked him out of it, because whatever I was owed, it wasn't his to collect, and I didn't want my children's father showing up in a headline. Renee ended it with Marcus for real this time, and I believed it faster than I expected to, mostly because Kayla believed it, and by then Kayla had earned the right to be my second opinion. Marcus didn't work at Howler and Freight past the end of that month. I never asked what conversation made that happen. Some doors I decided I didn't need to open. We started therapy twice a week, in an office above a downtown pharmacy, with a counselor named Dr. Emerson. I won't pretend the anger left on any kind of schedule. There were nights, rocking Lily at 3 in the morning, when I'd look at her sleeping face and feel a resentment so sharp it scared me. Never at her, at the situation that had put her here. There were mornings I couldn't hold Renee's eyes across the table without seeing a parking lot outside a building I'd never wanted to know existed. But there was also Renee at every single session, including the ones I could tell she wanted to bolt from. There was the slow, unglamorous work of two people finding out whether trust that's been broken that specifically can turn into something sturdier than it was before, instead of just a patched-over version of the same thing. There was Caleb's 10th birthday, 6 months after Lily, dinosaur decorations strung across the backyard, Renee and I on opposite sides of a yard full of 9-year-olds, catching each other's eye and actually smiling. Not performing fine, just fine. A year and a half out, we're still married. I want to be specific that this wasn't inevitable. There was a long stretch where I genuinely didn't know which way it would go, and staying was a decision I made with my eyes open, not out of fear or convenience, but because I watched Renee do the slow, humiliating work of earning back what she'd broken, and because I decided our family was worth finding out if it could be rebuilt on more honest ground than it had ever stood on before. We're in a smaller house now, on the other side of Millbrook. Renee doesn't work for her father anymore. Her decision, not my condition, though I won't pretend it didn't relieve me. Her phone still locks. She shows it to me freely now, unprompted, because we agreed early on that privacy and secrecy aren't the same thing, and a marriage that survives has to actually know the difference instead of just saying it does. Caleb is 11. Dinosaurs traded up for megalodons. Maddie is 8. Plays soccer with an intensity that's unmistakably her mother's. Lily just turned 1, has Renee's exact laugh, and will never know, if we can help it, what her arrival was tangled up in. I think about that Friday in the driveway a lot. The kiss, the flannel shirt, I love you, spoken by a woman already carrying something that would nearly end us. I used to replay it hunting for the lie. Now I think I finally understand it wasn't one. She loved us, and she was also actively drowning in something neither of us had words for yet, and both of those things were true in her at the same time, sometimes in the same hour. Holding two true things that contradict each other is a lot harder than holding one clean villain. It's also, I've come to believe, the only honest way to hold most people.